Welcome to Check This Out, podcast for kids.
And their grown-ups, where we explore people, places, ponderings, and past moments from history that shape the world around us. My name is Amy Contreras.
And I'm Cece.
I'm kind of sad about today's episode, Cece.
Why, Mama?
Because this is our last episode in our series on women who changed the world.
You gotta be joking.
It's okay. I'm excited to tell our listeners about Eva Perón, the former First Lady of Argentina, and her impact on politics, feminism, and the world around her. And if I'm being honest, I say it's our last episode on women who changed the world, but we'll definitely be talking about more amazing women from history in future episodes of Check This Out. We're just changing things up a little bit after this week.
How, Mama?
Our episode following this one kicks off our series on the 7 natural wonders of the world, because we don't just talk about people from history, we also talk about places, ponderings, and past moments.
I love it.
Good. The 7 natural wonders of the world are amazing places, and there's so much to learn about them. But for right now, I think we should spend some time talking about our final woman in our Women Who Changed the World series and learn all about Eva Perón. What do you think, Cece?
Let's get into it.
Awesome. Now, can I be honest with you?
Yeah!
Do you know why I know who Eva Perón is?
No.
It's because there was a Broadway musical written about her life. I'm a huge sucker for musicals, and I loved this one. Do you know what it's called? Do you think it's A, Evita, B, A Song of a First Lady, or C, Señora Perón Musical?
Mama, can I guess? A.
If you guessed A, you're right. Evita, the musical, was released in 1978 and was written by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. It was later adapted into a film that came out in 1996 starring the pop star Madonna.
That is cool.
It is. This musical is how I learned about Eva Perón and her impact on the Argentinian people during the time her husband served as president of Argentina. Now, if you've been listening along with Check This Out podcast for kids, Eva Perón is the second First Lady we've talked about on the podcast. Listeners, do you remember who the other one was? Was it A, Michelle Obama, B, Martha Washington, or C, Eleanor Roosevelt?
Any idea who it was?
If you said C, Eleanor Roosevelt, you're right. We talked about her in our series on famous Americans. Eva Perón served as the First Lady of Argentina from 1946 until her death in 1952. Her husband served as president until 1955 and again in 1974. Much like First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, Eva Perón did a lot to change what it meant to be a First Lady. She took on roles and responsibilities that had previously never been owned or thought of being touched by a First Lady. Now, I'll explain all that more throughout the episode.
Fair enough.
So let me ask you a question to kick things off. True or false? Eva Perón was born into a noble family, which is how she met and married the future president of Argentina, Juan Perón.
The answer is false.
You're right, Cece. In fact, Eva Perón's birth and childhood often caused issues for her as an adult because she was born poor and from the lower classes. Plus, her parents weren't married. She was born in May of 1919 and was the youngest of 5 siblings.
That was a long time ago.
You're right, Cece. Eva Perón was born over 100 years ago. And back then, people had very different views of what a family life should look like, especially in Argentina, which was very traditional. Eva's father, Juan Duarte, was wealthy and married. He had a whole other family, including a wife and several children. Eva's mother was his mistress. Her father died suddenly when she was young, and her family were left with nothing. They were even kept from attending his funeral to say goodbye. They struggled greatly after her father Juan Duarte's death, while also having to deal with a community that looked down on them and excluded them.
Things were not easy.
Eva was the youngest of 5 children, and so her siblings were often each other's company because they struggled to make friends and be welcomed into Argentinian society. But from an early age, young Eva knew two things. One, she wanted to be an actress. And two, she wanted to escape the small rural towns she grew up in and go to Buenos Aires.
Why, Mama?
Well, Cece, I'm not sure why she wanted to be an actress, but accounts of her childhood say that she loved dressing up and performing and acting. She would even put on shows with her sisters in the streets of their village. She also starred in a school play. She wanted to go to Buenos Aires because it was the big city in Argentina, and it was a place of opportunity and people. Do you know that Buenos Aires was sometimes referred to as a different name back when Eva Perón was younger? What do you think it was? Do you think it was A, the city on the sea, B, the glittering city, or C, the Paris of South America?
If you pick C, that was a super duper good choice.
Buenos Aires was referred to the Paris of South America due to its strong European influences. There's a lot of French architectural and cultural elements throughout the city. It's also known for its cosmopolitan atmosphere.
What does that mean?
Great question, Cece. A cosmopolitan atmosphere is talking about a place where a wide variety of cultures, nationalities, and influences blend together, so it creates a really diverse environment. This can be everything from food to clothes to architecture to music or religion. The list goes on and on.
I had no idea.
Well, now you know. Eva Duarte's family was poor, and they struggled all while she was growing up. It wasn't until she was older that life stabilized, but throughout she had a strong desire to go to the big city and pursue her dreams of being an actress.
What happened?
Well, Eva got her wish. She moved to Buenos Aires when she was 15. There's some debate amongst biographers and historians about whether or not she ran away or if she went with her mother's blessing. But what we know for sure is that Eva Duarte was in Buenos Aires by the time she was 15, working as an actress.
Check this out.
Listeners, when Eva moved to Buenos Aires, the year was 1934. And while movies existed, one of the main forms of acting back then was on the radio. Think of it a little bit like listening to a podcast today. Entire movies, plays, and shows would be created and acted over the radio. Listeners would use their imagination to envision what was happening while radio actors spoke the parts.
Why does that matter?
Because Eva Perón got her start as an actress doing radio acting. This also eventually played a role in her success as First Lady in her ability to reach the masses across Argentina by the radio.
That makes a lot of sense.
Eva continued to find success as a radio actress, and in 1937, she landed her first film role as an actress. She acted both on the radio and in movies for the next several years. She was so successful, she even eventually co-owned the radio company she worked for.
That is quite the achievement.
Surprisingly, her career as an actress is what led her to her time playing in her biggest role, the First Lady of Argentina.
Tell me everything!
In 1945, Eva met her future husband, Juan Perón. Try to guess where they met. Do you think it was
A,
at one of her movie premieres?
B,
a charity event?
C,
a friend introduced them to each other? If you guessed B, that was a great guess. In January of 1944, a big earthquake destroyed the town of San Juan. The earthquake was so big it killed nearly 10,000 people. The Secretary of Labor at the time, Juan Perón, organized a gala event as a fundraiser for the victims of the earthquake. Actors and actresses were invited, along with politicians and wealthy donors, and Eva Duarte was one of the actresses who was invited. This party is where Eva Duarte and Juan Perón met and fell for each other.
My mind is blown.
Let's talk about Juan Perón for a moment. Even though this episode is focused on his wife, Eva, who's also known as Evita, her relationship with Juan Perón is why she's remembered today and how she was able to create the impact that she did.
Let's get into it.
Juan Perón came from an upper middle class family and attended military school, which helped launch his military career. He progressed through the ranks of being an officer and served as an officer on military, diplomatic, or nonviolent missions. In 1941, he came back to Argentina after traveling around Europe, and he became a colonel. He joined a group of officers that engineered a coup of the government, and they overthrew the ruling party in 1943.
What do you mean, Mama?
A coup is when a small but powerful group of people in a country suddenly and unexpectedly use force to take control of the government. Think of it as a forceful takeover. Coups are usually done by the military or police instead of people voting.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. So Eva's future husband, Juan, was part of the group that overthrew the government. He held various political positions in the new regime until he eventually became Minister of War. But now, back to Juan and Eva meeting and how their relationship ended up changing Argentina.
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
After they met at the party, Eva and Juan's relationship took off. They quickly moved in together, and Eva took a great interest in his political work. Because of her background as someone of one of the poorer classes, she was an outsider in the wealthy and political circles that her husband moved in. She was often made to feel unwelcome and was sometimes overtly excluded by the wives of the politicians. But she played an important role in helping her then boyfriend, Juan Perón, gain support from the masses.
Ooh, that's good to know.
In Argentina, there was a group of workers and laborers who played a huge role in the success of Juan Perón and ultimately getting him elected as president. What do you think this group was called? Was it Los Descamisados, Los Niños, or Los Compadres? If you said Los Descamisados, you're right. Los Descamisados means the shirtless ones. And they were a number of any of the poor or underprivileged Argentine workers, and they formed Perón's main support group.
I learned something new today.
On October 9th of 1945, some of his political rivals within the armed forces demanded that Juan Perón resign from his positions as vice president, secretary of war, and secretary of labor and social security. Remember, he and his colleagues had helped stage a coup in 1943, and there were a few years of unrest following that in the leadership of Argentina. After Juan Perón resigned, he was arrested and was held by the ruling government.
I can't believe that happened.
Well, believe it. It happened a lot back then. But for years, with the help of Eva, Juan Perón had been gaining a following among los descamisados in the working class of Argentina. When he was arrested, there were massive strikes across Argentina, and thousands of los descamisados demanded his release. Juan Perón was released from police custody on October 17, 1945. That night, he gave a speech to 300,000 people from the presidential palace.
Woo! History!
A couple of days after his release, he married Eva in a private ceremony, officially making her his wife, Eva Perón.
What an amazing story!
I mean, they did make it into a musical. Juan Perón was elected president of Argentina in February of 1946, and his wife, Eva Perón, became the First Lady of Argentina.
That's a big deal!
Eva Perón was affectionately called Evita by the people of Argentina. Evita was deeply involved in government work, and she held numerous official and unofficial roles. While some celebrated her role and involvement in the government, many didn't like it, especially the wealthy upper class and the political players who wanted to keep women out of politics.
That didn't stop her.
Keep in mind, women in Argentina couldn't even vote when Evita became First Lady. So to think of her as being involved in the decision-making and policy creation was very uncomfortable for the men who had historically been in power. But with Evita's help and the influence of her husband, the president, women gained the right to vote in Argentina in 1947.
That is quite the achievement.
And there's more. As First Lady, here are just some of the things Evita did. First, she regularly visited workers and union leaders at factories, learning about their needs and asking for suggestions. She would also use these visits to give speeches in support of her husband. She ran a massive foundation.
More on that later.
She purchased and ran her own newspaper. She had created the Peronist Women's Party in 1949. Peronists were people who supported her husband, Juan Perón. She spoke at large gatherings all over the country and on the radio in support of her husband and his politics. Evita acted as the de facto Minister of Health and Labor, awarding generous wage increases to the unions, who responded with political support for Perón. She was even encouraged and nominated to run for vice president along her husband in an election in 1951. And she famously went on a goodwill tour all around Europe, promoting her husband's Peronist ideas and building diplomatic relationships. This was called the Rainbow Tour.
She was a busy lady.
She was, but she wasn't without her critics. For example, she created the Eva Perón Foundation in July of 1948 and acted as its leader and key decision maker. The foundation received donations from businesses, unions, and workers, but these donations were often forced.
What do you mean, Mama?
Well, people, companies, and organizations faced fines from the government and even jail time if they didn't contribute to Evita's foundation. So while her methods of getting the money were definitely not always ethical, the resources from her foundation were actually used for goods to do things like establish hospitals, schools, orphanages, homes for the old people, and other charitable institutions. Eva was largely responsible for the passage of the women's suffrage law and formed the Peronista Feminist Party in 1949. Some of her critics said that her involvement in the government was allowing her to steal money from the government because she was always dressed in expensive clothes and jewels. Other critics said she overstepped into government affairs since she was not an elected official. Also, the newspaper she owned was clearly used to create positive press about her and her husband, which people didn't always like, even though the sales of the newspaper were really strong.
I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, Evita was a character that was deeply loved by her supporters, but also deeply hated by her critics. Her Rainbow Tour was another example of this. In 1947, Evita traveled to Spain, Italy, France, and Switzerland. It was a goodwill trip, which included meeting with various leaders like Spain's leader, Francisco Franco, the Pope, and Charles de Gaulle. She was dressed to the nines. She gave money to poor children in Spain. She visited the Palace of Versailles in France. But she encountered protesters in Switzerland who threw stones and tomatoes at her.
Things were not easy.
Some Europeans distrusted aspects of Juan Perón's rule, and others disapproved of what they viewed as Evita trying to get attention and fame.
I wish I could have seen that.
Me too, but there are pictures of her outfits and travels online, so we can look at those together. In 1951, Evita started feeling sick. This was the same year that she was nominated for vice president alongside her husband, but she had to say no to the nomination. After seeing a doctor, it was revealed that she had cervical cancer. Evita had to go a number of painful surgeries and medical procedures, but ultimately they didn't save her. She died in 1952. She was only 33 years old.
How sad.
Yes, she was very young. The whole country mourned her death. Evita's funeral procession was attended by almost 3 million people.
I had no idea.
Yes, like I said, she was both loved and hated. But her funeral showed how many loved her and how deeply she was loved by her supporters. People even made journeys or pilgrimages from all over the country just to see her casket. So although her life was short, it was legendary, and that's why we're talking about her as a woman who changed the world.
Let's recap some of her achievements.
Evita was a strong advocate for women's suffrage or voting rights in Argentina. This was achieved in 1947. She played a really important role in getting women's participation in politics. Through the Eva Perón Foundation, she initiated numerous social programs aimed at helping the poor, including providing access to healthcare, education, and housing.
That is cool.
Eva actively supported labor rights and worked alongside her husband, President Juan Perón, to improve conditions for the poorer class and workers. She helped to strengthen the labor movement in Argentina, and she advocated for fair wages, unions, and benefits. Evita became an icon of the working class struggle and is celebrated for her contributions to Argentine culture. Her life story has inspired countless works of art, and including, of course, the famous musical Evita, which talks about her legacy.
I remember hearing about that.
As the First Lady of Argentina, Evita had significant political influence and was a key figure in her husband's government. She played a really big role in shaping policies and rallying support for Perón's administration. She became a symbol of the Peronist movement.
I want to check out more about that.
Now, before we let you go, you know we don't just love exploring interesting moments and people and pastimes from history.
We also love to rhyme.
We wrote you a poem about Evita Perón. Sorry in advance it isn't as good as the musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. But here we go. Eva Perón we remember as Evita. She left her mark on the world in Argentina. She navigated life with passion and fire, not allowing circumstances to stop her from climbing higher. A daughter, sister, and actress to start, her voice on the radio pulled her from the dark. That's how she met her love, President Juan Perón, and together they did what neither could have done alone. Evita did rise as First Lady to the masses. Her husband created laws and Peronism for the classes. She helped women gain the vote. She gave back to the poor. She flew around the world on her rainbow tour. Love her or hate her, her legacy is long, which is why we have a musical full of Evita songs. She died so young, leaving sadness in her wake, and Argentina's future had its own fate. Eva Perón, a first lady like no other. Her memory no one can smother. Consider her work, consider her path. Evita, your impact forever will last. Thanks for listening to another episode of Check This Out. Here at the Check This Out podcast, we know there's a lot of information, and it can be overwhelming to find accurate information online. This podcast is a tool for you to help you do something called citing your sources. As you get older and do projects for school, you'll learn that certain types of websites or information sources aren't verified or have evidence and documentation to back them up. On Check This Out, we use verified sources to build the stories you hear about. Our sources for this week's episode are Encyclopedia Britannica, Biography.com, the BBC, Time Magazine, and Iowa State University.
Thanks for listening. See you next episode. Don't forget to subscribe.